Namaste. Acts chapter 1. The first account I made, Theophilus, of all that Yah-ooh-sha began both to do and to teach until the Yom when he was taken up, after giving instructions through the Kodesh Ruach to the emissaries whom he had chosen, to whom he also presented himself alive, after his suffering by many infallible proofs, being seen by them for 40 Yomim, speaking concerning the reign of Yahuwah. And meeting with them, he commanded them not to leave Yerushalayim, but to wait for the promise of the Father, which you have heard from me, because the Yah-ooh-kanon truly immersed in water, but you shall be immersed in the Ruach HaKodesh not many Yomim from now. So when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Adoni, would you at this time restore the reign to Yisharal? And he said to them, It is not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority, but you shall receive power when the Ruach HaKodesh has come upon you. And you shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem, and in all Yehuda and Shamarun, and to the end of the earth. And having said this, while they were looking on, he was taken up, and a cloud hid him from their sight. And as they were gazing into the sky as he went up, see, 2 men stood by them dressed in white, who also said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up into the sky? The same Yah-ooh-sha, who was taken up from you into the sky, shall come in the same way as you saw him go into the sky. Then they went back to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, which is near Jerusalem, a Shabbat Yom's journey. And when they came in, they went up into the upper room where they were staying, both Kepha and Yakub and Yah-ooh-kanon and Andri, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Mattityahu, Yakub the son of Alphai, and Shimon the Zealot, and Yehuda the son of Yakub. All these were continuing with one mind in prayer and supplication, with the women and Miriam the mother of Yah-ooh-sha, and with his brothers. And in those Yomim Kepha, standing up in the midst of the Talmidim, and there was a gathering of about 120, said, Men and brothers, the scripture had to be filled, which the Ruach HaKodesh spoke before by the mouth of Daud concerning Yehuda, who became a guide to those who seized Yah-ooh-sha, because he was numbered with us, and did receive his share in this service. This one therefore purchased a field with the wages of disobedience, and falling forward, he burst open in the middle, and all his intestines gushed out. And it became known to all those dwelling in Jerusalem, so that in their own language that field was called Kafal Dama, that is, field of blood. For it has been written in the book of Psalms, Let his dwelling lie waste, and let no one live in it, and let another take his office. It is therefore necessary that of the men who have been with us all the time that Adoni Yah-ooh-sha went in and out among us, beginning from the immersion of Yah-ooh-kanon to that Yom when he was taken up from us, that one of these should become a witness with us of his resurrection. And they put forward Yosef called Barsabah, who was also called Justus, and Mattityahu. And praying, they said, You, Yahuwah, know the hearts of all. Show which one of these 2 you have chosen, to receive the share in the service and office of the emissary, from which Yehuda by transgression fell, to go to his own place. And they cast their lots, and the lot fell on Mattityahu, and he was numbered with the 11 emissaries. Chapter 2. And when the Yom of the Festival of Weeks had come, they were all with one mind and in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from the heaven, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them divided tongues, as of fire, and settled on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Kodesh Ruach, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Ruach gave them to speak. Now in Jerusalem there were dwelling Yahudim, dedicated men from every nation under the heaven. And when the sound came to be, the crowd came together and were confused, because everyone heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying to each other, Look, are not all these who speak Galileans? And how do we hear each one in our own language in which we were born? Parthians and Medes and Elamites, and those dwelling in Aram Naharaim, both Yehuda and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, both Phrygia and Pamphylia, Mitzrayim, and the parts of Libya around Cyrene. Visitors from Rome, both Yahudim and converts, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them speaking in our own tongues the great actions of Allahim. And they were all amazed and were puzzled, saying to each other, "What does this mean?" And others mocking said, "They have been filled with sweet wine." But Kepha, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said to them, "Men of Yehudah and all those dwelling in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen closely to my words. For these men are not drunk, as you imagine, since it is only the 3rd hour of the Yom. But this is what was spoken by the prophet Yoah. And it shall be in the last Yomim, says Allahim, that I shall pour out of my rock on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And also on my male servants and on my female servants I shall pour out my rock in those Yomim, and they shall prophesy. And I shall show wonders in the heaven above and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and splendid Yom of Yahuwah. And it shall be that everyone who calls on the name of Yahuwah shall be delivered. Men of Yisrael, hear these words. Yah-ooh-sha of Nazareth, a man from Allahim, having been pointed out to you by mighty works and wonders and signs which Allahim did through him in your midst, as you yourselves also know, this one given up by the set purpose and foreknowledge of Allahim, you have been impaled and put to death through the hands of lawless men. Him Allahim raised up, having loosed the pangs of death, because it was impossible that he could be held in its grip. For Daud says concerning him, I saw Yahuwah before me continually, because he is at my right hand, in order that I should not be shaken. For this reason my heart rejoiced, and my tongue was glad, and now my flesh shall also rest in expectation, because you shall not leave my being in the grave, nor shall you give your kind one to see corruption. You have made known to me the ways of life. You shall fill me with joy in your presence. Men and brothers, let me speak boldly to you of the ancestor Daud, that he died and was buried, and his tomb is with us to this Yom. Being a prophet then, and knowing that Allahim had sworn with an oath to him, of the fruit of his loins, according to the flesh, to raise up the Mashiach to sit on his throne. For seeing this, he spoke concerning the resurrection of the Mashiach, that his being was neither left in the grave, nor did his flesh see corruption. Allahim has raised up this Yah-ooh-sha, of which we are all witnesses. Therefore, having been exalted to the right hand of Allahim, and having received from the Father the promise of the Kodesh rock, he poured out this which you now see and hear. For Daud did not ascend into Shamayim, but he himself said, Yahuwah said to my Adonai, sit at my right hand, until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Therefore let all the house of Yisrael know for certain that Allahim has made this Yah-ooh-sha, whom you impaled, both Adonai and Mashiach. And having heard this, they were pierced to the heart, and said to Kepha and to the rest of emissaries, Men, brothers, what shall we do? And Kepha said to them, Repent, and let each one of you be immersed in the name of Yah-ooh-sha Mashiach, for the forgiveness of sins, and you shall receive the gift of the Ruach HaKodesh. For the promise is to you and to your children, and to all who are far off, as many as Yahuwah our Elohim shall call. And with many other words he earnestly witnessed and urged them, saying, Be delivered from this crooked generation. Then those indeed who gladly received his word were immersed, and on that Yom about 3,000 persons were added to them, and they were continuing steadfastly in the teaching of the emissaries, and in the fellowship, and in the breaking of bread, and in the prayers. And fear came upon every being, and many wonders and signs were being done through the emissaries. And all those who believed were together, and had all in common, and sold their possessions and property, and divided them among all, as anyone might have need. And Yom by Yom, continuing with one mind in the Kodesh place, and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising Allahim and having favor with all the people. And Adonai added to the assembly those who were being delivered, Yom by Yom. Chapter 3. And Kepha and Yah-ooh-sha were going up to the Kodesh place at the hour of prayer, the 9th hour. And a certain man, lame from his birth, was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the Kodesh place, which is called Yafa, to ask alms from those entering into the Kodesh place, who, seeing Kepha and Yah-ooh-sha about to go into the Kodesh place, asked for alms. And Kepha, with Yah-ooh-sha looking steadfastly at him, said, "Look at us." And he gave heed to them, expecting to receive whatever from them. But Kepha said, "I do not have silver and gold, but what I do possess, this I give you. In the name of Yah-ooh-sha, Mashiach of Nazareth, rise up and walk." And taking him by the right hand, he lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones were made firm. And leaping up, he stood and walked, and went in with them into the Kodesh place, walking and leaping and praising Elohim. And all the people saw him walking and praising Elohim, and they recognized him, that it was he who sat begging alms at the lovely gate of the Kodesh place. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what befell him. And as the lame man who was healed was clinging to Kepha and Yah-ooh-sha, all the people ran together to them in the porch, which is called Shalomos, greatly amazed. And seeing it, Kepha responded to the people, "Men of Yisrael, why do you marvel at this, or why look intently at us, as though by our own power or reverence we have made him walk? The Elohim of Abraham, and of Yitzchak, and of Jacob, the Elohim of our fathers, esteemed his servant Yah-ooh-sha, whom you delivered up and denied in the presence of Pilate, when he had decided to release him. But you denied the Kodesh and obedient one, and asked that a murderer be granted to you. But you killed the author of life, whom Elohim raised from the dead, of which we are witnesses. And by the belief in his name, this one whom you see and know, his name made strong, and the belief which comes through him has given him this perfect healing before all of you. And now, brothers, I know that you did it in ignorance, as your rulers did too. But this is how Elohim has filled what he had announced beforehand, through the mouth of all the prophets, that his Mashiach was to suffer. Repent therefore and turn back, for the blotting out of your sins, in order that times of refreshing might come from the presence of Adonai, and that he sends Yah-ooh-sha Mashiach, pre-appointed for you, whom heaven needs to receive until the times of restoration of all things, of which Elohim spoke through the mouth of all his Kodesh prophets, since of old. For Musha truly said to the fathers, Yahuwah your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers. Him you shall hear according to all things, whatever he says to you. And it shall be that every being who does not hear that prophet shall be utterly destroyed from among the people. And likewise all the prophets who have spoken from Shemuel and those following have also announced these Yomim, you are sons of the prophets, and of the covenant which Elohim made with our fathers, saying to Abraham, and in your seed all the Goyim of the Arets shall be blessed. To you first Elohim, having raised up his servant Yah-ooh-sha, sent him to bless you, in turning away each one of you from your Belial ways. Chapter 4. And as they were speaking to the people, the priests and the captain of the Kodesh place and the Sadducees came upon them, being annoyed because they taught the people and proclaimed the resurrection from the dead in Yah-ooh-sha. And they arrested them and put them in jail until the next Yom, for it was already evening. But many of those who had heard the word believed, and the number of the men became about 5,000. And it came to be on the next Yom that their rulers and elders and scribes assembled in Jerusalem, as well as Hanan the high priest, and Caiaphas, and Yah-ooh-sha, and Alexander, and as many as were of high priestly descent. And having placed them in the middle, they asked, By what power or in what name did you do this? Then Kepha, filled with the Kodesh Ruach, said to them, Rulers of the people and elders of Israel, if today we are called to account for a good deed towards a sick man by whom he has been healed, let it be known to all of you and to all the people of Israel that in the name of Yah-ooh-sha Mashiach of Nazareth, whom you impaled, whom Elohim raised from the dead, by him this one stands before you, healthy. This is the stone which was rejected by you builders, which has become the chief cornerstone. And there is no deliverance in anyone else, for there is no other name under the heaven given among men by which we need to be delivered. And seeing the boldness of Kappa and Yaukanon, and perceiving that they were unlearned and ordinary men, they marveled. And they recognized that they had been with Yah-ooh-sha. And seeing the man who had been healed standing with them, they could not contradict it. But when they had commanded them to go aside out of the council, they consulted with one another, saying, "What shall we do to these men? For indeed, that an outstanding miracle has been done through them is apparent to all those dwelling in Jerusalem, and we are unable to deny it. But in order that it spreads no further among the people, let us strongly threaten them to speak no more to anyone in this name." And they called them and commanded them not to speak at all, nor to teach in the name of Yah-ooh-sha. But Kepha and Yaukanon, answering them, said, "Whether it is right in the sight of Elohim to listen to you more than to Elohim, you judge. For it is impossible for us not to speak of what we saw and heard." And having threatened them further, they released them, finding no way of punishing them, because of the people, because they were all praising Elohim for what had been done. For the man was over 40 years old, on whom this miracle of healing had been done. And having been released, they went to their own people and reported all that the chiefs, priests, and elders said to them. And having heard that, they lifted up their voice to Elohim with one mind, and said, "Yahuwah, your Elohim, who made the heaven and the earth and the sea, and all that is in them, who by the mouth of your servant Daud have said, Why did the Goyim rage, and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth stood up, and the rulers were gathered together against Yahuwah and against his Mashiach. For truly in this city there were gathered together against your Kodesh servant Yah-ooh-sha, whom you anointed both Herod and Pontius Pilate, with the Goyim and the people of Yisrael, to do whatever your hand and your purpose decided before to be done. And now, Yahuwah, look on their threats, and give to your servants all boldness to speak your word, by stretching out your hand for healing and signs and wonders to take place, through the name of your Kodesh servant Yah-ooh-sha." And when they had prayed, the place where they came together was shaken, and they were all filled with the Kodesh rock, and they spoke the word of Elohim with boldness. And the group of those who believed were of one heart and one being, and no one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but they had all in common. And with great power the emissaries gave witness to the resurrection of the Adonai Yah-ooh-sha, and great favor was upon them all. For there was not anyone needy among them, for all who were possessors of lands or houses sold them, and brought the prices of what was sold, and laid them at the feet of the emissaries. And they distributed to each as anyone had need. And Yosef, who was also called Barnabas by the emissaries, which means son of encouragement, a Luite, a native of Cyprus, having land, sold it, and brought the proceeds, and laid it at the feet of the emissaries. So, chapter 5. So a certain man named Cananiah, with Shapira and his Asha, sold the possession. And he kept back from the price his Asha, also being aware of it, and brought a certain part and laid it at the feet of the emissaries. But Kepha said, "Cananiah, well, why has Shatan filled your heart to lie to the Kodesh rock, and keep back from the price of the land for yourself? While it remained, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not in your authority? Why have you conceived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to Elohim." Then Cananiah, hearing these words, fell down and breathed his last. And great fear came upon all those who heard of this. But the young men arose and wrapped him up, carried him out, and buried him. And he came to be about 3 hours later that his Asha came in, not knowing what had taken place. And Kepha responded to her, "Say to me whether you sold the land for so much." And she said, "Yes, for so much." So Kepha said to her, "Why have you agreed to try the rock of Yahuwah? Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they shall carry you out." And immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. And the young men came in and found her dead, and carrying her out, they buried her beside her husband. And great fear came upon all the assembly and upon all who heard of this. And through the hands of the emissaries many signs and wonders were done among the people. And they were all with one mind in Shalomo's porch. But of the rest, no one had the courage to join them. However, the people made much of them. And more believers were added to the Aduni, large numbers of both men and women, so that they brought the sick out into the streets and laid them on beds and couches, that at least the shadow of Kepha passing by might fall on some of them. A large number also gathered from the surrounding cities to Jerusalem, bringing sick ones and those who were troubled by unclean ruachs, and they were all restored to health. But the high priest rose up, and all those with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees, and they were filled with jealousy, and seized the emissaries and put them in the public jail. But a messenger of Yahuwah opened the prison doors at Lailah and brought them out, and said, Go and stand in the Kodesh place, and speak to the people all the words of this life. Now when they heard, they went into the Kodesh place early in the morning, and were teaching. But the high priest and those with him came and called the council together, with all the elders of the children of Yisrael, and sent to the prison for them to be brought. But having come, the officers did not find them in the prison, and they went back and reported it, saying, We found the prison shut in all safety, and the watches standing outside before the doors. But having opened them, we found no one inside. And as the high priest and the captain of the Kodesh place and the chief priests heard these words, they were puzzled and wondered what this might be. But one came and reported to them, saying, Look, the men whom you put in prison are standing in the Kodesh place and teaching the people. Then the captain went with the officers and brought them, not with force, for they feared the people lest they should be stoned. And having brought them, they set them before the council. And the high priest asked them, saying, Did we not strictly command you not to teach in this name? And look, you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching, and intend to bring the blood of this man upon us. And Kepha and the other emissaries answering said, We have to obey Elohim rather than men. The Elohim of our fathers raised up Yah-ooh-sha, whom you laid hands on, hanging him on a timber. Him a prince and a deliverer, Elohim has exalted to his right hand, to give repentance to Yisrael and forgiveness of sins. And we are his witnesses to these matters, and so also is the Ruach HaKodesh, whom Elohim has given to those who obey him. And those hearing were cut to the heart, and took counsel to kill them. But a certain one in the council stood up, a Pharisee named Gamliel, a teacher of the Torah, respected by all the people, and ordered them to put the emissaries outside for a little while, and said to them, Men of Israel, take heed to yourselves what you intend to do to these men. For before these Yomim Todah rose up, claiming to be somebody. A number of men, about 400, did join him. He was slain, and all who obeyed him were dispersed, and came to nothing. After him, Yehuda of Galilee rose up in the Yomim of the census, and drew away many people after him. He also perished, and all who obeyed him were scattered. And now I say to you, stay away from these men and leave them alone, because if this plan or this work is of men, it shall be overthrown. But if it is of Elohim, you are unable to overthrow it, lest you even be found to fight against Elohim. And they heeded his advice, and having called for the emissaries, beating them, they commanded that they should not speak in the name of Yah-ooh-sha, and let them go. Then indeed they went rejoicing from the presence of the council, because they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. And they daily in the Kodesh place, and in every house, they did not cease teaching and bringing the Besorah, Yah-ooh-sha the Mashiach. Let me check the time. Okay, one more chapter. Chapter 6. And in those Yomim, when the Talmidim were increasing, there arose a grumbling against the Hebrews by the Hellenists, because their widows were overlooked in the daily serving. So the 12 summoned the group of the Talmidim and said, It is not pleasing for us to leave the word of Elohim and serve tables. Therefore, brothers, seek out from among you 7 men who are known to be filled with the Ruach HaKodesh and wisdom, whom we shall appoint for this duty. But we shall give ourselves continually to prayer and to serving the word. And the word pleased the entire group. And they chose Stephanos, a man filled with belief, and the Ruach HaKodesh, and Philip, and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timon, and Parmenas, and Nicolaus, a convert from Antioch, whom they set before the emissaries. And when they had prayed, they laid hands on them. And the word of Elohim spread, and the number of the Talmidim increased greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests were obedient to the belief. And Stephanos, filled with belief and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. But some of those of the so-called assembly of the freedmen, Cyrenians, Alexandrians, and those from Cilicia and Asia, rose up disputing with Stephanos. But they were unable to resist the wisdom and the ruach by which he spoke. Then they instigated men to say, "We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moshe and Elohim." And they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes. So they came upon him, seized him, and brought him to the council. And they set up malicious witnesses who said, "This man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against this Kodesh place and the Torah. For we have heard him saying that this Yah-ooh-sha of Nazareth shall overthrow this place and change the instructions which Moshe delivered to us." And all who sat in the council, looking steadily at him, saw his face was like the face of a heavenly messenger. Maybe one more. I'll do one more. Chapter 7. And the high priest said, "Is this so?" And he replied, "Men, brothers and fathers, listen. The Elohim of esteem appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Aram Naharaim, before he dwelt in Charan, and said to him, 'Come out of your land and from your relatives, and come here into a land that I shall show you.' Then he came out of the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Charan. And from there, after the death of his father, he removed him to this land in which you now dwell. And he gave him no inheritance in it, not a foot of it, but he promised to give it to him for a possession, and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child. And Elohim spoke in this way, that his seed would be sojourning in a foreign land, and that they would be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. And the nation to whom they shall be enslaved I shall judge, said Elohim, and after that they shall come out and serve me in this place. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so he brought forth Yitzchak, and circumcised him on the 8th yom. And Yitzchak begat Jacob, and Jacob begat the 12 ancestors. And the ancestors, becoming jealous, sold Yosef into Mitzrayim. But Elohim was with him, and delivered him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim. And he appointed him governor over Mitzrayim and all his house. Then a scarcity of food and great distress came over all the land of Mitzrayim and Canaan. And our fathers found no food. But Jacob heard that there was grain in Mitzrayim, and he sent out our fathers the first time. And at the second time Yosef was made known to his brothers, and Yosef's race became known to the Pharaoh. And Yosef sent and called his father Jacob and all his relatives to him, 75 people. And Jacob went down to Mitzrayim and died, he and our fathers, and they were brought over to Shechem, and laid in the tomb that Abraham bought for a price of silver from the sons of Hamor, father of Shechem. But as the time of the promise drew near, which Elohim had sworn to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Mitzrayim until another king arose who did not know Yosef. Having dealt treacherously with our race, this one mistreated our fathers, making them expose their babies, so that they should not live. At that time Moshe was born, and he was well-pleasing to Elohim, and he was reared 3 months in the house of his father. But when he was exposed, the daughter of Pharaoh took him up and reared him as her own son. And Moshe was instructed in all the wisdom of the Mitzrayim, and was mighty in words and works. And when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Yisrael. And seeing one of them being attacked, he defended and revenged him who was oppressed, smiting the Mitzrayite. And he thought that his brothers would have understood that Elohim would give deliverance to them by his hand, but they did not understand. And the next Yom he appeared to two of them as they were fighting, and urged them to peace, saying, Men, you are brothers. Why do you lawless one another? But he who was lawlessing his neighbor pushed them away, saying, Who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Do you wish to kill me as you killed the Mitzrayite yesterday? And at this saying, Musha fled and became a traveler in the land of Midian, where he fathered two sons. And after 40 years were completed, a messenger of Yahuwah appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush in the wilderness of Mount Sinai. And Musha, seeing it, marveled at the sight, and coming near to see, the voice of Yahuwah came to him, saying, I am the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Yishak, and the Elohim of Jacob. And Musha trembled and did not have the courage to look. But Yahuwah said to him, Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is Kodesh ground. I have certainly seen the evil treatment of my people who are in Mitzrayim, and I have heard their groaning and have come down to deliver them. And now come, let me send you to Mitzrayim. This Musha whom they had refused, saying, Who made you a ruler and a judge? This one Elohim sent to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the messenger who appeared to him in the bush. This one led them out after he had done wonders and signs in the land of Mitzrayim, and in the Red Sea, and in the wilderness 40 years. This is the Musha who said to the children of Yisrael, Yahuwah your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers. Him you shall hear. This is he who was in the assembly in the wilderness with the messenger, who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers who received the living words to give to us, to whom our fathers will not become obedient, but thrust away, and in their hearts they turned back to Mitzrayim, saying to Aharon, Make us mighty ones to go before us. For this Moshe who led us out of the land of Mitzrayim, we do not know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those Yomim, and brought an offering to the idol, and were rejoicing in the works of their own hands. So Elohim turned and gave them up to worship the host of the heaven, as it has been written in the book of the prophets. Did you bring slaughtered beasts and offerings to me during 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Yisrael? And you took up the tent of Molech, and the star of your mighty one Kiun, images which you made to bow before them. Therefore I shall remove you beyond the Babel. The tent of witness was with our fathers in the wilderness, as he appointed, instructing Moshe to make it according to the pattern that he has seen, which our fathers, having received it in turn, also brought with Yah-ooh-sha into the land possessed by the Goyim, whom Elohim drove out before the face of our fathers until the Yomim of Dawood, who found favor before Elohim, and asked to find a dwelling for the Elohim of Jacob. But Shalomo built him a house. However, the highest one does not dwell in dwellings made by hands, and the prophet says, The heaven is my throne, and Eretz is my footstool. What house shall you build for me? Says Yahuwah, or what is the place of my rest? Has my hand not made all these? You stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears. You always resist the Kodesh Ruach, as your fathers did. You also do. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who before announced the coming of the obedient one, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers, who received the Torah as it was established by messengers, but did not watch over it. And hearing this, they were cut to the hearts and gnashed the teeth at him. But he, being filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, looked steadily into the heaven and saw the esteem of Elohim, and Yah-ooh-sha standing at the right hand of Elohim. And he said, Look, I see the Shamayim opened, and the son of Adam standing at the right hand of Yahuwah. And screaming with a loud voice, they plugged their ears and rushed upon him with one mind, and threw him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Shaul. and they were stoning Stephanos, as he was calling and saying, Adoni Yah-ooh-sha, receive my rock. And kneeling down, he yelled with a loud voice, Adoni, do not hold this sin against them. And having said this, he fell asleep. Okay, that's it. Namaste. In King Yah-usha's name, God bless you all. Amen. Namaste.